One of the great things about being a grower or gardener is there is so much to be able to learn. We can grow our whole lives and still learn new things each season. In this Red Gardens project, with so many different soil and fertility management practices in the different gardens and growing spaces, all the new things that I explore, and all the trials that I do, this learning process is accelerated. Or at least it seems that there is so much to learn with each growing season. And some of the things that I learn each year have been completely new to me. Others are things that I suspected or had heard about but wanted to confirm or see for myself. And other things it seems I need to learn over and over again. But I thought it would be interesting to look back at a range of some of the different things that I felt that I learned in 2023. In late 2022, we set up a large trial of 5 different no-till methods to establish a vegetable growing space. And all 5 options had one thing in common, an overlapping layer of cardboard underneath it all to suppress the growth of the existing vegetation. But by early spring last year, it was obvious that this cardboard layer was not enough to prevent the regrowth of scutch or couch grass and some of the other perennial weeds. There was way too much regrowth, so I decided to cover the entire growing space with ground cover fabric for the full year, to kill off all of the weeds and hope to have a clean restart for the trial this year. I had wanted to convert another space between the 2 large polytunnels into fixed beds for growing salad and other quick rotation crops, but the ground was rough and really overgrown. 2 years ago, we covered the entire area with a double layer of ground cover fabric and left it covered for a full year, which was a useful place for one of the potato grow bag trials. When we pulled up the cover early last year, almost all of the vegetation had been killed off, apart from the remains of a few small patches of bindweed. There was still some work to dig over and level the compacted soil, but once the beds were established, there was very little work to do in weeding, which saved a lot of time in the summer, and it was worth the wait. The planting strategy that I've been trialing for growing these quick rotation crops is to sow in or transplant a full bed with a mix of different salad and fast-growing root crops at the same time. And then to plant the next bed with a similar mix 2 weeks later and continue through the 4 beds, returning to the first bed 8 weeks later with another planting. In the shoulder seasons, I could extend this to 3 or 4 weeks between sowings, hoping that most of the crops would be finished by then, but some were finished early and others needed more time. So I started sowing a longer growing crop like carrots in the space right after a fast growing crop like radishes was removed, which made a simple planting plan a lot more complicated, taking more effort and attention, but I was able to fit in more and get more crops out of the same space. For one of the grow bag trials, the large bags were filled 2 years ago with municipal compost that had been made the previous year with a lot of woody material. The purpose of this trial was to see how this relatively infertile compost could be improved, and in the second year of growing potatoes in the more aged material, I expected better results. But the potato yields were not really any better in the second season, even in a lot of the bags with additional amendments. So even with several years of aging, this compost had not aged or decomposed enough to be able to release enough nutrients for the hungry plants. The bags of municipal compost that produce the strongest and healthiest looking potato plants and the largest yield of potatoes have been regularly fed with some form of soluble fertilizer. Adding a small amount of conventional soluble fertilizer several times while the plants were growing seemed to really help the plants get the nutrients they needed, especially nitrogen. And the plants in the bags that have been liquid fed each week with 1 part urine diluted in 10 parts water also grew really well. In both cases, the plant roots seemed to be able to grab onto and use the regular addition of soluble forms of nitrogen. And this was obviously a useful way to feed the plants that would otherwise struggle to get enough nutrients from the soil or growing material. The other large potato grow bag trial was exploring different ways to amend or improve the soil that we have in this area, and to try growing potatoes in a wide range of different carbon and non-soil based materials. There were definite differences in how well or poorly the same variety of potatoes grew in the different amendments and materials, but we were able to harvest potatoes out of all of the bags. The nutrient holding capacity of the material is important, and the type of material can affect the quality of the tubers that are harvested, and the weight of the material can make the bags a lot easier or harder to move. But it seems that I can get potatoes to grow in many different materials, so long as enough fertility is added in time for the plants to get what they need. Growing so many potato plants in so many large bags is a real challenge, especially to make sure the plants have access to enough water in the limited volume of the grow bags. Although it does rain a lot here in Ireland, we do get dry spells, and the dripper watering system that I installed made a huge difference. After the initial setup, we could water all of the large grow bags at once in a way that allows the water to soak into the soil or growing medium. And with a timer set up, this watering could be done regularly and consistently, at least when it hadn't rained enough, and this saved a huge amount of time. A few years ago, we started to grow sweetcorn in one of the larger polytunnels, and it has been great to be able to harvest a crop like this, even if it does not produce a lot for the amount of space that it takes up. But I was not convinced that this heat-loving plant would grow well enough outside in the cool maritime climate that we have here in Ireland. But last year I decided to try growing a shorter variety of sweetcorn in some large grow bags, and as part of an outside planting of the Three Sisters. Although the plants growing with the squash and beans did not produce well, the plants in the grow bags were surprisingly productive, and apparently it is possible to grow some varieties of sweetcorn outside in Ireland. Another crop I didn't think I would be able to grow are sweet potatoes, but I wanted to try growing these heat-loving plants in one of the polytunnels to see if I could get a decent yield. It is really hard to buy in any slips or young plants from anywhere in Ireland, so I ended up propagating my own slips from roots that I bought in a shop, but I didn't know if the varieties would be suitable for this context. The plants grew surprisingly well, and we were able to harvest a reasonable crop of roots, but the yield was still quite small for the amount of vegetable growing space the vining plants took up. I should be able to get some slips for this year from a sweet potato variety that is apparently more suitable for this climate, which hopefully, together with learning how to grow the plants better, we should be able to get a much better harvest this year. Another crop that I've had difficulties getting a reasonable harvest from in the past are sweet peppers. But I've been exploring better ways of pruning and controlling these plants. This seems to really help reduce the impact of molds and mildews on the plants and fruit in the humid conditions of the polytunnel. We also grew several different varieties of peppers last year, and the hybrid varieties produced a significantly better and larger crop than the open pollinated varieties we tried. With tomatoes, I find the open pollinated varieties often produce a better crop in our context. But for the sweet peppers, it seems that it is definitely worth the extra cost for the hybrid seeds. The brassica family of plants are much more suitable for growing in this climate, but they also have a few pests that can cause a lot of damage. One of the worst pests for these plants that I have experienced are the hungry caterpillars of the cabbage white butterflies, which can cause serious damage to many types of brassica plants. A few years ago, we started covering the kale, broccoli, and other brassica plants with a netting to prevent the butterflies from laying their eggs on the leaves of these plants. And by consistently netting all susceptible crops for a few years, we significantly reduced the population of these butterflies. And last year, there were very few around and virtually no damage to the brassicas. Now I need to try to do the same thing to significantly reduce the population of carrot root fly. Climbing beans are one of the more successful crops in our polytunnels, but the plants have a fairly short period when we can harvest a lot of good quality beans. In order to extend the season of this high value crop, I decided to grow 4 batches of climbing beans down one bed of the larger polytunnels, sown about 4 or 6 weeks apart. And I thought I would try to fit in an early or late crop of courgettes or zucchini either before or after each batch of the climbing beans. But this succession cropping was more difficult than I had anticipated. It was hard to work out the timing of sowing and transplanting to coincide with the harvest periods of the other crop, and to try to fit both crops into a relatively short growing season so that they could both be productive. But it seems that one of the crops is always going to be compromised. One of the issues that we have with growing courgettes or zucchini is that the leaves of the plants typically get covered with a powdery mildew. I used to rely on pruning the older leaves to cut out most of this infection, but this year I tried regularly spraying all of the courgette leaves in the polytunnel with dilute milk. And this seems to have worked really well at killing off the mildew growth on a lot of the older leaves, and the regular spraying seemed to prevent the growth from developing on the newer leaves. This kept the late season courgette plants much healthier later in the season, and potentially more productive. Unfortunately, it just wasn't warm enough for them to be able to grow quickly. I'm still learning a lot about what causes issues with all of the different crops we grow, and last year I noticed some of the aubergine plants were really struggling and I didn't know why. After a bit of research, I suspected that this was due to Fusarium wilt, and I confirmed this by cutting open the stem of an impacted plant to reveal the typical brown streaks. This is a serious fungal disease that can apparently persist in the soil for a long time and can significantly affect quite a few different crops, and I wonder how long it's been impacting the crops in this polytunnel. Now I need to figure out how to deal with this serious soil-borne disease and to prevent it spreading to the other growing spaces, and I figured the best option might be to try to sterilize or solarize the soil in the summer. For a long time, I've been interested in the possibility of growing the Three Sisters, which I think is a great example of intercropping or companion planting that was developed and grown by some of the indigenous peoples of North America. Last year, we planted a trial of the Three Sisters in the older polytunnel and outside in the space beside the polytunnel, but neither trial was very successful. There were issues of plants growing too vigorously in the polytunnel and not well enough outside, and other issues of competition, spacing, and timing. It seems that this intercropping doesn't adapt well to other contexts and when trying to use different varieties, and perhaps our growing season isn't long enough or hot enough to grow these types of plants together. I have generally only grown one variety of beetroot in the past, but didn't know how it compared to others, so I decided to do a proper variety trial and probably ended up buying too many different varieties. We grew 24 different varieties of beetroot as an early summer crop in one of the polytunnels last year, and a later storage crop of the same varieties in one of the outside gardens. There were a few varieties with different colors and shapes, but most of them were a fairly typical beetroot, and there was not a lot of difference in the taste. With crops like tomatoes, there is a much wider range of tastes, colors, and sizes, and I enjoy growing many different varieties each year. But with beetroot, there is simply a lot less to really choose from, even though I was able to get so many different varieties. I've been growing some special varieties of cucumbers that have been bred for producing lots of cucumbers suitable for pickling, but I didn't really know the best way to grow them. Last year we grew some to just trail along the ground in one of the polytunnels. Another few plants were grown over a low wire frame to keep a lot of the cucumbers off the ground. And another set were trained up twine and pruned in a way to balance the growth of the new vines and more fruit. While the hanging plants could produce more in a given area and have potentially longer harvest period, they did take more time to manage, and I think perhaps it is better and easier to just let the plants grow over the bed surface, and just accept and plan around the shorter harvest season. I also wanted to experiment with runner bean plants to see how different types of pruning or letting the plants simply grow would change how the plants produced. With one set of closely spaced plants, we removed all the side shoots and cut off the growing tip when it reached the top of the support twine. And this hard pruning encouraged the plants to produce pods significantly faster than the other plants that were left unpruned, and it was much easier to find and pick the pods, but there was a shorter harvest period. This could be very useful for encouraging the plants to produce pods in a shorter growing season, or to produce dried seeds faster, and it also allows other crops to be planted into the space after they're done. Last autumn, I transitioned from having a friend working with me on a regular basis in the gardens to primarily working on my own for the first time in several years. Not having to organize things to keep somebody else busy in the garden several days a week has definitely decreased the number of things that I need to focus on, and I've been enjoying the increased flexibility of the past few months. Of course, without this consistent extra help, it's going to be harder to manage everything in this project, and I need to adjust my plans for next year to reduce the workload. But I also want to regularly call in Chris and other friends within the community to help with some of the larger tasks within the gardens that need to get done, and I'm not so good at asking for help. Hopefully some of the key things that I will learn in 2024 will be how to effectively organize all the work that needs to be done and to ask for help when it is needed, while still enjoying the benefits and flexibility of working mostly alone. Now that Chris is no longer working with me on a regular basis, though I hope she will still be able to help out when needed, it feels like the start of a new phase of this Red Gardens project. It will be really interesting to see how things go, and I wanted to thank Chris for all of the work that she's put into this project over the years, which has really helped to bring it to where it is today. If you find value in the work that we have done and like the videos that I make and want to support this project into the future, please check out the links to my Patreon and PayPal accounts in the video description. Liking, sharing, and subscribing also really help this channel and this project, but most importantly, thank you for watching.